Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we are discussing a watch that was originally launched with a black enamel dial in 2015, with the blue dial, as you see right here, also enamel in 2020. This is the Patek Philippe 5370P-011 split seconds chronograph. This watch is loaded and stacked. Large for a Patek Philippe chronograph. It's 41 millimeters in diameter, 50 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, 13.8 millimeters thick, and it has a sizable 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. So when it's on the wrist, it's got a full-sized, full-figured presence. It's not oversized, but it definitely fills up the wrist. And I really do think that you should have a wrist my size or larger. I'll zoom out a little bit to give you a better sense of proportion. But I think you want a 16 centimeter circumference wrist or up to wear this, just because it is quite broad and it is quite heavy. And at 13.8 millimeters, it's not particularly thin by manual wind Patek Philippe standards, but it has a purposeful thickness, and we'll talk about why that is in a moment. Taking a quick look, you can see that it actually will fit underneath the jacket cuff. Just because the side is sloped, it's thick, but it's not sheer, so there shouldn't be an issue there. Maybe the tightest of dress cuffs will get hung up. We have a sort of cobalt blue semi-gloss large rectangular scale alligator leather. There's a folded edge, a monotone stitched calfskin on the bottom. You can see it as a brand new Patek Philippe factory strap. It uses Patek's modern day pull tab spring bars. You can pop the strap off using your fingernail, no tools required. A platinum watch deserves a platinum clasp. Patek Philippe does not disappoint. You can see right here we have a single fold deployant to prevent you from dropping your watch, with a Calatrava cross on the buckle. The case is nuanced. Ever since Patek jumped into case making with its purchase of Atelier Réuni in 1975, its capabilities have become more sophisticated. And so here you see a little bit of channeling on the profile of the watch, and the recess has been satinated while the rest of the case has all been polished for a nice contrast, but it also adds some depth. The little cabochon that you see on the end, these are actually little cabochon of white gold. So if you look very closely, you can see a subtle color difference between the platinum, which is ultra white, and the white gold, which is a little bit warmer. Vintage inspired rectangular pushers, but you can see they're rounded across their top, and while they're polished on their outer face, they're actually satinated on their sides. You can see that the crown features a coaxial split second trigger. That's how that works. And on the dial, we have blue enamel. Now, initially, when Patek started making its own enamel dials, it was doing them just two ways. One, full-blown cloisonné, with a scene painted and crafted using cloisons, or gold wires, and individual colors. That was very scarce, application only, low volume, and when they did larger volume enamel, it was always a white dial, because white is the easiest enamel to achieve. The darker the enamel, the more it shows the imperfections of an enameled surface. So if you can imagine lacquer being mirror smooth, enamel typically has a finish that's a little bit more like the surface of an orange. And the closer you get, the more you see those little ripples. Well, to achieve a dark dial, you need to minimize those ripples as much as possible, sometimes even with wet sanding. So what Patek has achieved using the 5370 enamel dials in black and blue is it's managed to add darker colors without showing manifold flaws in the surface. They've really taken their enameling to the next level to be able to do these darker colors on a sheet the size of a dial. The dial base under the enamel has to be solid gold at Patek, so it's a gold dial with enamel on top in several applications, fired up to 20 times at 800 degrees centigrade. And of course, enamel is a vitreous or glass-based paint, so what you're seeing is a multi-layer glass cover above the solid gold base. Now, Breguet Arabic numerals are very special at Patek Philippe. They usually denote a special watch, and so we have them here in white gold to match the leaf-style hands for the hours, the minutes, and the sub-registers. A beautiful look that adds some depth to the dial. They are dramatic on top of the enamel base. Now, while the watch is not a sports watch, it's definitely a sporty dress watch with a combination of luminescence and a tachymeter scale on a dial. Tachymeters on dials tend to be more of a vintage feature that you'll find on watches pre-1960, and so this watch represents a little bit of a nod to the great Patek Philippe chronographs of the mid-20th century. You can also appreciate that the watch does have that split seconds capability, and there is a little bit of a distinction in the finish of the 2 seconds hand. Now, flip it all over, all 30 meters water resistant, so splash, rain, but not submergence. We have the CHR 29535 PS for Petite Seconde, a blinding array of different components with phenomenal depth. You can see that the watch includes components made of brass, those are your bridges and plates, but also of steel, those are the silver components of the chronograph. Now, if you look at center, you can see that there's a little brake system for the split seconds function, stopping and then releasing, stopping and then releasing. There's a secondary column wheel which is buried underneath a forest of levers and springs, but there are 2 column wheels. There's one, this is the primary, which is black polished and capped in Geneva fashion, and then the secondary is right there. There's also a decoupling mechanism, which is something that Patek and Lange in particular put on their splits to ensure that the chronograph doesn't, quote, drag or slow down when that second retropont or split seconds hand is stationary, so the decoupler allows the watch to maintain the same timing and avoid the loss of balance amplitude. You also have a manual wind 65-hour power reserve. You've got a balance beating away at 4 Hertz. It's actually 6 position adjusted, 1 more than a standard chronometer, and it features a free-sprung Gyromax style balance architecture with an overcoil hairspring. The higher-end Patek Philippe watches feature a metal overcoil hairspring, and the higher-end chronographs feature these lateral clutches that you see right here, column wheel and lateral clutch, because it takes more work and expertise to make an overcoil. Remember, the silicone stuff pops out of a machine. This has to be shaped by hand, and it takes more experience to tune a lateral clutch chrono. They're also more beautiful. The feel and the sound of the column wheel is like nothing else. The finish is second to none. And yes, as a modern Patek caliber, it does have a stop seconds function, which is really nice to shout out because a lot of people complain about not having that. With 2 seconds hands, you can gauge 2 different concurrent events. By the way, you can hear in the background, we love our pets here at Watchbox. And you're able to gauge, for example, the waxing or waning gaps between 2 runners around a track or 2 cars around a course. It's really very, very cool and one of Patek Philippe's signature complications. Again, 65 hours manual wound pivoting on 34 joules with movement finish that will really test your assumption that Lange defines the best in mainstream luxury. I think at this level, Patek Philippe is no worse than co-equal, and you could see the degree of virtuosity in the finishing. Look at how these beveled points, these beveled sides come to sharp tapered tips on the steel chronograph clutch, the black polish of the cap of the column wheel. Look at features like the hand-finished springs, which have been micro-satinated and beveled. There's an instantaneous minute jumper with a pawl and a pawl wheel. Just lots of lovely details, including golden chaton for the jeweled pivots of the chronograph clutch, things you wouldn't expect to see on even a high luxury chrono from the likes of Vacheron or Audemars Piguet. Patek is still the best in that regard, and really they continue to give Lange a run for their money. Don't assume that the best finish in mainstream horlogerie is done in Saxony. Patek will really challenge that notion. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.